And we are live with Bob Poznanovich. Bob, how are you this morning?
Good, Kelly. How about yourself?
I'm great. Are
Good.
you in Minnesota now, or are you still traveling abroad? You were all around, I think, when you and I were emailing and texting a week or two ago.
Yeah, I'm still traveling a little bit. I'm trying to slow down a little bit, but I don't know. Old dog, old tricks.
So your life has been a life of some fair amount of travel as you're working within. And tell us a little bit about your background. You've been with Hazelden for previously for a fair amount of time.
Yeah, for 16 years with Hazelden, most recently as a chief growth officer. I just transitioned out. I had a laugh when I said, old dog, old tricks, is because allegedly retired
Ah,
from the full time job. But I think I've been busier than I have been when I was working. So I retired in August for my full time job, but I'm staying on board to support the organization and the mission as their senior advisor and fellow, and still doing work on recovery advocacy for them. So I'm still involved a lot with the brand, which has got me, doing a lot of public speaking, which is why I'm traveling a lot these months. But I'm spending most of my time in Minnesota, but also Chicago.
and so growth officer, how does someone grow? There's a lot of people that need substance abuse counseling and help. Is it a advocacy for Hazelden and for the success, or how do you go about growing a business
Yeah,
like Hazelden's?
I think growth at Hazelden is not unlike growth for any of your clients, Kelly, or any of your industry. It's how do you sell more, how do you sell to more, and how do you sell for more? I think that's what we're doing. Except in this world, we're not talking about selling as much as we're talking about helping.
Yeah.
Right. And there's the same business issues. It's, how do you maximize your current capacity? How do you create new products and services that, are able to help more people? And then how do you continue to work with the payer world to increase the number of patient days and the dollars per day? That's a fair deal for both, the providers, the patients, and the payers.
That one, from my own experience, the payer side seems like that would be a major issue on the side of treatment. I think no matter what medical help people are getting these days, the payer side, the insurer side, is always a component of getting a length of stay in a hospital or a treatment facility, or particular drugs. Are they covered in the formulary and all these different rules that so I could see how that would be a big part of that. So are you spending time with actual insurers in educating them on why, if you keep a person 60 days versus 30 days, you're going to have a 50% better or 10% better outcomes? Is that how that works?
Yeah, I think I've been very fortunate over the years as we've moved at Hazelden from a self-pay, not insurance uh, provider to a fully immersed provider of services via insurance, that we've really worked hard on creating partnerships with the payers. So there's a win-win for them, for us, and for the patient. So I think in the most part, we get a number of days that we need to treat people. We know over time it's about length of engagement. That's really important, not just how long they stay at their initial level of care, but how long they stay engaged post that, and more acute stage. And we've got the payers to get creative in how we're contracting and what we're bundling in our care to really improve outcomes. Yeah, I think there's always work to be done. I think there's always going to be that, we try to go high, they try to go low on the price. But in general, I think almost all of the payers that I work with support the recovery, support substance use treatment, and are trying to be fair to give us the best outcomes and help to drive patients to those providers that are somewhat much, well, I should say, those providers who are more ethical in their care. And, I think that becomes one of the bigger challenges now, and this is kind of maybe a little transition to AI. I think the big issue for people in the substance use place, unlike other healthcare, is 9 out of 10 people who need care don't get care. And it's less about coverage, and it's more about their own challenges where it just the way they see care, the way care is delivered this way, the system isn't built greatly for people with substance use. I think we still have work to do to integrate it into the whole, into the normal healthcare systems where people go to. I think stigma, the myths, the disease itself helps to keep people sick. And there's this also the disease nature is that you deny you're sick, and then you feel that maybe you could handle this yourself. And then even when you often understand that you're sick, that's often refusing care. And a lot of that's the process you have to go through. It's hard to navigate care. It's hard to find the right provider. It's hard to get past your own problems. We kind of say that sick brain that got you into this problem now all of a sudden has to be healthy enough to get you out of it. And that's a lot of hurdles for somebody. And I think that's where I'm really optimistic and where I know Hazelden is looking at and other providers is, um, how do we use AI not to replace the one to one or the magic of recovery or the simplicity of one alcoholic helping another alcoholic, but it's how do we complement that by creating additional pathways. So I'm privileged to be able to work with Hazelden and understand, the years of experience that I personally walked down as when I was before I was a patient, to understand the families I worked with before when I owned my own behavioral health company, to help create these new systems. So kind of the system that helped me, I'm still trying to work on evolving. And I'm also advising Anonymous Health, who is a AI company focused on addiction and behavioral health, to create these workflows that augment the patient pathways to make it a lot easier for patients to begin the journey so that they don't have to suffer along, or prospective patients don't have to suffer alone, and they could start that journey, in a digital environment where it's not judgmental, where it's confidential, um, where they're able to engage in evidence-based screening tools, get content that matches their needs, have AI help with some motivational interviewing to get them to make that next step. And then when they finally pick up that phone on that one day that today's the day I'm calling, that work we want to do is to help make that agent that they're calling better prepared to help that patient wherever they're at in their psychological patient journey get the help they need. And so I'm really excited about what AI could do. Again, not to replace traditional recovery, not to replace any agents, but to complement those, to create new pathways and new ways for us to screen, evaluate, and provide new interventions, whether it be by phone, by in person, or digital.
So is it, in the past, and I come from a background, my Irish side of my family, my grandfather owned a Irish bar in a small town in Wisconsin, and on the Norwegian Swedish side, they owned a bar in Minnesota. So I've seen a lot of people that are drinkers in my life, and I've seen the people that went to the bar often, and the small few that stopped drinking, and they had the reasons for doing it, clearly, but they relied heavily on people in that process of staying sober. Is the technology helping to integrate people around them, or is the technology more on the front end helping the counselors and the data people make better decisions to strategically structure care for people?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question, Kelly. I think it's a both. I look at AI to help, like three different levels, right? One is what do we do for the patient, right? We talked about helping them get access earlier, help them investigate care, use tools to screen and educate them, to recommend, potentially next steps. I think it could help them with the admissions process and get care. It could also help them in the back end through recovery by using apps to help identify potential that process of relapse and to complement the one-to-one environment. I don't think it'll ever replace it, but things like Zoom and team meetings and, and video chats, there's a lot of AA meetings that are done now where people can connect like you and I are doing right now over the phone and share, like in a meeting. What would be missing on that one-to-one is the magic of 12-step recovery, which is the meeting before the meeting and the after the meeting. When you get together with men and women who share the same, challenges with you, but you get a chance to have some coffee, have dinner, and you get a little bit of a social life, because you think about when you use drugs and alcohol your whole life, you take it away, there's a big hole. And we're trying to do is to fill that hole with things that are fun and in relationships that are intimate, not just intense, and that you have some people who know you, who aren't going to judge you. You could talk about the simplest things, like somebody cut ahead of me in front of a parking space today and drove me crazy. Now, a non-alcoholic might view it differently than somebody who's been struggling with alcohol. And we understand, sometimes those things that somebody who's not been through that doesn't understand. I think the other side of it, though, is the providers. I think there's a lot of hope on the provider side. One of the big issues that we face is provider burnout, and a lot of people in healthcare, we define one of the main causes of burnout is provider documentation and having the time to take the time to write documentation, to have those notes put into the EHR systems. And there's a lot of progress being made now to take, doctor scribing and to, build that into the medical record. And I know there's people who've been working on being able to take groups and larger numbers of people, in a meeting to kind of ascribe, which is, been challenges. But I think if we could look at how do we make the workforce more engaged, less burnout, that will become a competitive advantage for providers that have the technology, because providers are going to want to work for those that allow them to see more patients and eliminate some of the administrative work. I think if you look at the entire ecosystem of a provider, it's the helping people get in the door. It's about helping people stay in the door, by having good documentation that meets the requirements for quality and for compliance and for the payers, and then hopefully engages them in ways while they're in treatment to stay to complete their treatment and prepare them for the step down. And then there's also, going to be a lot of work done on revenue recognition and being able to identify parts of where there's revenue erosion in the system. And I think it'll be interesting to see where the payers use AI to check and the providers use AI. I hope it gets past that we're both using, our own chat agents to compete with each other, as opposed to looking at how do we use the data to provide better care and reduce costs for all of us. I think we're not there yet. I think I say about AI is this is as worse as it's ever going to be, right? I mean, it is pretty good. It's pretty good right now, so it's only going to get better. And I think what my hope is for the behavioral health industry and for some of the legacy providers, they're typically trailing in the implementation of technology, which will be a competitive disadvantage moving forward. So I'm hoping through podcasts like you welcome me to do, Kelly, and for carrying the word, the message, that we could help to get some of the providers who may don't have the staff to do some of the research, get some education about this, because I do think that we're all going to have to kind of be AI enabled. Um, I was at a conference recently. I thought the line of the day was AI shows up everywhere except for the bottom line. So I think we've got to also focus on doing really what matters, not what's glitter,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
chasing a lot of this fancy stuff. But I think if you look across the ecosystem of an organization, there's some opportunities that really apply well today for AI. But I think, organizations have to think about what their platform is going to be, what their integration strategies are to their CRM, to the EHR, to other places, to really think about a strategy and then take it, kind of one step at a time. But I'm really excited because I think we've underused technology in helping people with substance use get help. And I'm just thinking about, you go to your doctor today and you say, I'm struggling, I drink alcohol, maybe that visit with his assistant. You say, I'm taking drugs and alcohol every day. I doubt that you're going to get, in most cases, and all the ones I've tested, you're going to get a referral. You're going to get an intervention. But if you say I smoke, your doctor's probably going to give you a pamphlet or put something in your EHR. I'm hoping that we could start to build that types of brief interventions and referrals into the flow here through additional use of technology and technology integration. So that whole person care will come together, where we're treating medical, behavioral, and social kind of as a whole patient.
Yeah. How does the US stack up against other countries, other Western countries, when it comes to the treatment and the success of treatment for drug and alcohol abuse? Are we
We've made tremendous progress in the U.S. with regards to stigma, although we've got a lot of work to do. We're making a lot of progress finally in the workplace, which pays a bigger part of the healthcare costs that the government does. Now, the employers are starting to realize that this is a big cost to them, showing up in a lot of different ways. In fact, I was just asked to be on the committee within the state of Minnesota, has a Department of Addiction and Recovery, and they're building a committee to help more organizations become workplace recovery friendly workplaces, which encourage people who are in recovery to work for their organization, encourage people to get help if they're struggling, because we're starting to see now through the data that people who have lived these life experiences, through their resilience and through the values of recovery, are actually better employees and produce higher. So I think we're working in the U.S. to reduce stigma. There's a lot of care. I think if you look around the country, the rest of the countries, there's less access in other countries. There's still more stigma in other countries. Yeah, but some of the work that Hazelden has been doing over the years is sharing their knowledge and experience, and in some of their content with organizations around the world to help. But I think that we're in a much better place. And some of the work that was done by Hazel and others to become parity, to allow substance use to be covered, equally with insurance, and then the Affordable Care Act also, said addiction was one of the top 10, needed to be one of the 10 required diseases covered. So I think we're making progress. There's still lot of work to go when only 1 out of 10 people get help. I mean, when you think about anybody who goes to the doctor today with a chronic illness, 8 out of 10 people will get help. If you go in for a mental health problem, 50% of those people get help. But with substance use, it's only 10% still. So I think we've got a long way to go to debunk the myths Like, for example, I'm sure you've heard people have to hit bottom. Like, that's most people don't hit bottom. We bounce around and we struggle, and the family gets to go on the roller coaster or the employer with us. Really, the reality is no other disease in the world would we ever say that somebody has to get worse before they get better. In fact, that's even cruel to think that way, but that's some of the myths that have been around for a long time. So we've got to debunk those. We got to, provide more education and work on stigma where you don't have to suffer silently. Be okay. It's okay to ask for help, and it's really show a sign of strength.
Huh. It's interesting. So I coming from the upper Midwest, I was a songwriter in Nashville at EMI many years ago, 30 years ago. And at EMI and through, Sony, EMI, the bigger companies on Music Row, it was commonly talked about being in the 12-step program. And it was almost an introductory kind of background to get into certain doors in Music Row at the time. And I always thought, being from a place, seeing it in, northern Minnesota and in northern Wisconsin, where people would never talk, openly like they were doing. I thought, cultural, that there are these places, these pockets where people accept it, and they're open about their addictions, and they are working hard to stay sober, and it really seemed to make a positive impact on that large group of people, on Music Row. And I think if you have that culture around you, it can get there, but it's hard to get into a culture like that.
Yeah, the workplace has to get over it, and just kind of recognize that there's no magic bullet. There's not one company doesn't have people who are struggling. It's random. It's not. It doesn't. It is. It is. It's not like I work for a certain employer. I'm from a certain state, or have a certain education or a certain ethnic background that I'm immune from this. We all get addicted equally. It doesn't discriminate. So we should be treated. I laugh when you said, Kelly, you're from the music industry. That's what's one of the backgrounds that we share. In fact, I think it was when I started getting more into the music scene in Chicago and some of the blues stuff and started playing harmonica in that scene that I got addicted. But it was also a bunch of the people I found afterwards, like you said, who were in recovery, who were former musicians. But it took me a long time to be able to get back to playing music. That's just one of those things that took time in recovery. Was it triggered something? So it's about slowly taking time to get back to the things you used to do that didn't trigger you, and giving you more time to do the things that really pleasure you. And I think about, I said that I used to be a better harmonica player when I was doing cocaine. The reality was I got stuck on an A minor chord for about 6 years, so I never got. So the reality was I wasn't that good of a musician
Oh,
when I was using.
you think that you're kicking some serious butt.
Yeah, but I couldn't
Yeah,
get off
no,
of a sad. All I could do was play was one sad chord for a lot of years, so it
no,
wasn't very very
no.
productive.
No, you get enough Jack Daniels in me, and I think I'm the best guitar player in the world. Yeah. Well, Bob, many people are struggling with this issue. Many people, family, almost everybody, probably almost everybody or everybody knows somebody in their immediate family. So this is critical to the health of Americans and all around the globe. So thanks for being a champion of this health care for people, and I hope AI can be of assistance in any way that you can dream it up to be. And thank you so much for your time today.
Kelly, thanks for listening, having this topic on your podcast. Again, with stigma, sometimes this doesn't show up, but I really appreciate you, giving us the opportunity to share a little bit with you.
Well, you're very welcome. For everyone else out there, you are watching the vodcast. Thanks, Bob.
Thanks, Kelly. I didn't let you know.